Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Let's just start the formal session of roundtable discussion. First of all, respected speakers and attendees, accept my gratitude for coming today in virtually and in person. It's a month of blessing. May Allah showers the blessing to the Pakistan in the time of crisis. So, my name is Khalid. I welcome you all to the Institute of Regional Studies. As a part of strengthening regional climate resilience program, which is recently launched by the Institute, I welcome you to this dialogue roundtable discussion. As we are all aware that there's a mounting evidence that increasing global warming temperatures are basically induced by the human-centric approaches. And the link is very clear. We need to uncouple ourselves from this fossil fuel addiction. And we all know there is no quick fix for this. So today, we are joined by the external panel, both in physical and in virtual, about the thermal energy. Having said that, let me proceed to the roundtable discussion entitled as the Decarbonization of Energy Sector and what are the options for Pakistan. So having said that, we all know that CPAC is a flagship project for the BRI. And it's a financing window for development in Pakistan. Chinese banks are heavily invested in the power sector. And we all know that there is a China Power Hub Generation Company also working on imported coal, while there's another funded project by the government of Pakistan, by the Chinese bank to the government of Pakistan in the coal, for the coal usage in the Gwadar. So wind, solar, and hydropower do not have the fuel price for the input. They have low cost of running, but the technology comes with the infrastructure, which actually required for the operationalized cost for the renewable energy. Thus, the country needs a way forward in which the government can consider along three dimensions: regulation, incentivization, and facilitation to the public and private bodies. Government of Pakistan actually submitted NDCs against the climate pledges, which sets ambitious target for the energy mix: 60% generation input into the energy mix by 2030. So Chinese are leading manufacturer of renewable energy development, and specifically in the solar panels. We get together because Pakistan citizens are pro-certainty for the sustainable energy supply. To understand this issue and drive a way forward for Pakistan, the Institute of Regional Studies is holding a roundtable discussion, which is today, right now, about the decarbonization of energy sector. And we are, as I mentioned, we are joined by the extreme expert panels, which are actually have expertise in the energy field. We have panelists from the energy sector, from the CPAC authority, from the academia and environmental journalist. So I'll leave the floor to you, and Dr. Khalid, would you continue the discussion? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Institute of Regional Studies, for holding this very insightful and very timely consultation and workshop on prospects of renewable energy and role of BRI and its flagship project, that is CPAC. Well, I am Dr. Khalid Waleed. I am from Sustainable Development Policy Institute. I lead the research on energy in that SDPI. I would be talking more on incentivization of this renewable energy sector. Before this, let's set a bit of context here. Pakistan is currently facing a triangle of three E's crisis. First one is the economy, then there is energy, and there is environment. And these three E's are interlinked. Let's say Pakistan's energy woes and all the financial hurdles are obviously due to the adversities on external sector, where we are importing like $12 billion of fuel every year. That is the link of economy and energy. Because of that expensive fuel, we are compelled to use coal, which is cheaper to us, and that coal or carbonization of our economy or energy sector, we are facing different sort of environmental threats. So this is a triangle between economy, energy, and environment. What is the solution to it? Obviously, the solution to it is that we integrate our energy policies, that is renewable energy policies, into our economic policies. We integrate our environment policies into our economic policies. How can we do that? We need to first identify some challenges which are in the process of that incentivization. First one is that renewable energy is costly. Obviously, there is a capital cost. If we want to have sustainable energy, we need lots of investment. We need to find some financiers who can finance these renewable energy. Second challenge is obviously that there are less incentive for renewable energy sector, particularly for the private sector. Uh, One of the example is the curtailing issue. That is, if we want to invest something or some private investor build some wind power, they need curtailing, they face curtailing issue. Obviously, curtailing is sometimes necessary to meet the demand and supply system. But whenever there is curtailing, the investor or the owner of that particular wind station would suffer, because winds will not move and electricity would not generate. And then there are some sectors, if we want to talk about decarbonization, we cannot achieve that feat without decarbonize all the sector of the economy. Just decarbonization of power sector would not be enough. Those sectors are known as hard to power sectors. Then obviously there are future needs. We need to invest in sustainability. We need to invest in our future demands. So the way forward is renewable energy. And to achieve that feat, we need to incentivize renewable energy. How we can do that? One possible solution is sector coupling. Sector coupling is a concept in which we can literally transform that renewable energy of electricity into other form of energy. For example, P2G, power to gas, or power to hydrogen, P2L, that is power to liquids, or P2T, that is power to electric vehicles. I would stress, or I would talk more on power to gas. That is how you can convert renewable energy into hydrogen. That you build a renewable energy station, you use that electricity for electrolysis process, and you use that electrolysis process to produce green hydrogen. And that green hydrogen can be used as fuel. That green hydrogen is decarbonized. That green hydrogen can solve all the environment problems. So we can solve that triangle of ease, economy, energy, and environment through this particular P2G initiative. What are different challenges? Obviously, first one, cost, then infrastructure. We can have our Chinese friends are sitting over here with us. We can have their investments. We can have their experiences, their best practices. We can build that infrastructure. We need public awareness that there exists some alternative fuels as well, hydrogen, futuristic fuels, hydrogen, biodiesel, methane, ammonia, and so on, so on, so on. Then lastly, the market penetration. We need to incentivize these futuristic fuels so that they can penetrate the market. They can have their position against the fossil fuels. We can achieve decarbonization in our economy. What is the policy roadmap? Well, first one, we need to build our national hydrogen policy. There exists no hydrogen policy. Obviously, there is a MOU signed by Sindh government to install a hydrogen plant, but we need to have a national hydrogen policy so that this process can be kickstarted, because this is a very futuristic process. If we want to go into future with sustainable Pakistan, we need to act now. We need to plan now. Second is that we need to prioritize our policies, that we want to focus on short run, or we want to achieve a long run goal, which cannot be achieved if we want to look into the short run solutions. Obviously, those are the coal plants we are building. Those are obviously the short term solutions. Then establishment of governance system and enabling policies. There is no governance system currently available because there is no policy of hydrogen. And lastly, we need to probe into the environmental aspects of that hydrogen, because hydrogen the process produce hydrogen through electrolysis of water. We need to probe into that dimension as well. Lastly, what are different way forwards? We need to incentivize renewable energy technologies. We need to establish policy, industry, academia linkages, because academia would lead in that futuristic kind of innovative market that is hydrogen or different sort of sector coupling. And then academia's linkage with industry, and then industry can lead to private sector, and private sector can finance that project. Second last is the R&D investment through climate financing. Obviously, climate finance is available. We can tap that area. That is very hard. That requires lots of commitments, lots of documentation. But if we want to go into sustainable Pakistan, we need to tap that area. Lastly, and very important, that is the indigenization of that process. We need to build our infrastructure so that we are not dependent on foreign or imported supplies. We need to indigenize that process or production process so that these things can be built in Pakistan through the help of our friends and financiers. That's all from my side. Wish you a very insightful discussion. Thank you so much, President Sahab, for inviting. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Khalid, for this beautiful insight. And I think you are absolutely right. We need to focus on renewable energy incentivization so we can compete in the market. In COP28, Sultan Al Jaber actually mentioned in a recent interview that we need to make sure we incentivize those climate pledges so that the private investor can jump on into this sector. If we don't go for it, the chances of Earth getting hotter by 3 degrees is very high. Currently, the indices we have in our mind and globally, the world is actually heading toward 2.4 to 3 degrees centigrade temperature, which is actually very high. And for the countries like Pakistan, we are very vulnerable for that kind of conditions. So moving ahead to further continue our discussion, I just want Mr. Akil to comment on this. Like, sir, what do we have in mind, how we can develop a 1.5 degree compatible pathway for the energy sector in Pakistan? Thank you.
Thank you, Thala. Thank you for inviting me here. As Khalid Saab mentioned, it's a very pertinent and discussion which is taking place, I think, globally, not only in Pakistan. And this energy transition is a global perspective, not only Pakistan. In fact, Pakistan is a bit late in carrying out this transition, because different economies in the world, different countries have already set their pathways towards a clean energy transition, with the main focus on climate change and adapting and with mitigation measures in place. But still, the government has realized that, there are different perspectives which I would say are the main reason for Pakistan to choose and move towards the energy transitions towards clean energy. Pakistan's power sector has very peculiar issues. We had hydro-based power generation in 70s and 80s, and we made a transition towards fossil fuels, mainly because the prices of the fossil fuels were very low in 90s. And we added up more than 15,000 megawatts or 16,000 megawatts of thermal-based generation based on RFO and diesel gensets in 90s and in early 21st century. The thing that has been missing in the past, which the public sector and the policymakers realized very late, that there never had been a planned generation capacity additions in Pakistan. no plan looking forward 10 years ahead, 15 years ahead, 20 years ahead, which is typically done in the power sector globally. Our plans were more like based on the economic situations, the sudden and sharp rise in the demand for energy, demand increases due to industrialization, like in what happened in 2008. We had a sudden, after the global recession, we had an increased demand for the industry, but it was not supported by a proper plan in the power sector. And that is why we ended up in short-term measures like opting for rentals, then addition of coal power generation, that too at places which are not supposed to be typical places for coal power generation. Then switching over to depending on large-scale hydro, which have their own issues. But now, in the last 3-4 years, the government has, as part of the energy transition, moved towards a planned approach and the integrated capacity generation expansion plan, which we call the IGCEP, which is sort of a master plan for the next 10 years. That was announced first time in 2021, and 2 months ago, the second iteration, because it's a living document and it is to be revised every year. That has been developed, which primarily looks into the forecast demand power energy forecasts for the next 10 years, and depending on those demand scenarios, through software analysis, determines what capacity is to be added in which year, so that and the main principle is that we add the capacity on a least cost basis. And other parameters include our climate change commitments, our economic issues, and the financing structure that we have, and the financing shortcomings that we have. So based on that, the government has set a target to achieve 30% share of renewables. But in fact, if we look at different studies that have been carried out by World Bank, there's one study being carried out by the Asian Development Bank. Renewables can go beyond 30% by 2030. We can have maybe 50% of renewables coming from wind and solar and other renewable energy technologies. The issue is that our system has been built in the last 30-40 years on a typical fossil fuel based generation capacity, and then infrastructure is being run on such a way that we can't integrate beyond a certain level of variable renewable energy. So we have to change our systems. We have to change how we manage the grid. We have to change how we do the energy forecasting. The day ahead, the world has moved towards 10 minutes ahead forecasting, whereas we are still doing the minimum is we do 4 hours ahead forecasting, which is also done manually based on telephone calls and faxes. We don't have the live SCADA system operational, which is a sort of a live system that manages the grid. So we have the renewable energy potential, and the good thing is that in the last 4-5 years, due to the global commitments towards climate change, there is a lot of financing available under different funds, the Global Climate GCF, Global Climate Funds, and philanthropist fundings is available. And in fact, if we can tap those funds, we can get cheaper financing for renewables as compared to thermals, especially for coal and even for typical hydropower plants. That can easily be tapped, and because globally different countries, different companies, they have their own targets to achieve a certain share of equity in green and clean projects. So the investors are also available. We have a lot of attraction. Investors are attracted towards Pakistan because of the structure we offer, the sort of guarantees we offer to the investors of for large power projects. So we have the financing in place. We have the investors who can develop these projects. The issue is that we cannot look at the power sector, the clean energy generation only for the power sector. It has to be an integrated approach, and we need to devise an integrated energy plan for the next 20 to 30 years, till 2050, typically, which is being done by the developed countries. So when we talk about power sector, yes, we can install generation projects, and when we can achieve 30% of, or even 60%, including hydro, of clean energy in the power sector. But when we talk of energy sector, there's our transportation is still on fossil fuel, our agriculture is still on fossil fuel. There are many other segments of economy in industry, glass industry, cement industry, which are still running dependent on gas, fossil fuel, or coal-based generation. So we need to look at it holistically, and we need to develop pathways for, in terms of, for all the segments of the economy, taking into account our commitments and whatever targets we set for ourselves. Like Khalid Saab mentioned that we need to switch towards green hydrogen. Yes, there is a talk in the policy makers and in the government circles to develop a green policy for the hydrogen. But first, we need to look at what would be the first thing that, this one private energy company which is developing a wind solar based hydrogen production facility, and they'll be exporting all the hydrogen to China. But we need, before developing a policy, we need to study that, where, in which sectors we will utilize the hydrogen. We need to make a transition plan for those sectors. Then only then a policy would work. Just introducing a policy won't, incentivize the different sectors of economies to switch towards hydrogen. The other thing is that we also need to shift to electricity if we want to have a higher share of electricity being generated from renewables. We need to increase the electricity consumption in our country. We need to shift from gas and coal towards electricity in our transport, in our domestic sector, from gas stoves to electric stoves, in our industry. And this will also solve one other problem, which is the biggest problem of power sector in Pakistan. The difference in demand in summers and winters is so much. That is one of the main reasons of our circular debt, because the peak summer demand goes up to 30,000 megawatts. And typically you develop a system, you build your own capacity for the considering the peak demand, whereas in the winter demand drops down to 8,000 megawatts. So in demands, what Khalid Saab mentioned, that although wind is cheaper now, the new power plants are very cheap as compared to other thermals. Even the old ones are comparable to, are cheaper than fossil fuel RFO-based power plants, and comparable to hydro power plants. But we have to curtail them in winters, because we cannot stop nuclear. They run as a base load. We have electricity being generated from hydropower plants, because water is to be discharged for agriculture. We cannot stop that. So, and the demand is low. So in the end, we end up curtailing wind and solar power plants. So we need to shift our usage patterns in the domestic sector. One other thing is that typically globally, if you see the ratio between the consumption in domestic sector versus industry is something like 70-30 or 60-40, 60% in the industrial sector, 30% in the, or 30-40% in the domestic sector. In Pakistan, 70% of our consumption is in domestic sector, which is incentivized. So we can't generate our revenues. We can't even get the payments for what we generate from electricity from different sources. So we need to shift our demand patterns And that can be done by incentivizing. Let's say you declare that between 11 and 1 p.m. Government will provide electricity at 10 rupees instead of 18 or 24 rupees, because that's the time you have the peak solar generation available. The demand will automatically shift towards, instead of having a peak lower in the evening, you can shift the demand in the daytime. So this is sort of the things we need to do. We need to do an integrated energy planning for the whole different sectors, shifting our demand toward on electricity. Even there was a talk that we need this is the right time that we need to shift our railways on electricity, because that's a main guzzler of diesel, imported diesel. Shifting tube wells, which are run on diesel and petrol, to solar tube wells. These are the kind of things that can be done in short to medium term, and they can be done within the amount of the money government has. Instead of getting expensive loans, these small activities can be done through the subsidies we are providing to these sectors. The subsidies we provide to tube wells in Balochistan are tuning up to 40 billion rupees a year, and by 2030 they'll go up to 200 billion rupees, and they are all adding into the circular debt. So if we utilize those subsidy in 3 to 5 years, we can shift all the tube wells in Balochistan to solar. Thank you.
I think so that's a very well recommended solutions. And I think we need to work on those things, because as we know, in the last year, the globally $1.4 trillion are actually invested in renewable energy. And according to stats, we need 3 times or 4 times more than that. So yes, we need to decouple ourselves from multiple things. And yeah, moving to way forward, we are moving forward to our next speaker. I would like to call Mr. Rong. Would you comment on the issue, like what are the compatible strategies for the electrification of off-grid areas in Pakistan?
Okay. First of all, thanks for the invitation to speak here, and it's also my honor to learn from everyone regarding the energy, renewable energy and national grid issues. Actually, my name is Rong, from Port Qasim coal-fired power plant, which is invested by Power China, company from China, and another shareholder is AMC, Qatari shareholder. I have been working in Pakistan for 3 years, and I witnessed the development of energy sector of Pakistan, and also the difficulties we are facing now. So regarding the question of the electrification of off-grid area, I think the fundamental issue is economic issue. So if we have, frankly speaking, if we have money, we can invest a lot of national grid to the area, and maybe we can install lots of small power plants for that area. But actually, even the government is very well know the plan, but due to the economic restriction, so the step is maybe slower. So I want to, beside of this issue, I want to focus on the a solution to to solve the payment and the investment phase. So in the off-grid areas, if we invest some high voltage grid to that area, so it's much cost expensive. Maybe we can consider some small renewable project like small hydro like a small solar and small wind. But the small renewable energy is not very stable, like the solar project. When the cloud come, so the output is will be get down. And for the wind power plant, once the wind trend is changed, so the output also change. So we can combine the small renewable projects with some gas turbine generators, and the microgrid to cover that off-grid area for the operation. But even though if we don't have money to maintain the system, we don't have money to we don't have people to collect the payment, so it's also hard to maintain the operation. So the best solution, in my idea, is the smart metering system. And another policy should be also addressed is advanced payment strategy. So we can request the houses to advance pay the electricity fee, and then we provide the electricity. And if you cannot pay the money, so the grid operator can shut down the electricity supply. And I also know there is some agriculture in the off-grid areas, so we can give some policy to give some subsidies to that area, and provide the agriculture area with a very low tariff. So I think that is the idea from me for the electrification of off-grid area. Thanks.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Rong, and your recommendation of microgrid and advanced payment strategies are actually very good. So moving further, I think Dr. Rabia is online, back online, so we can have them. Dr. Rabia. Dr. Rabia, am I audible to you? No, ma'am, we cannot hear you. Unfortunately, there is a problem in our connection, internet connection. So moving ahead, let me invite another speaker, who is environmental journalist, Ms. Afia, to the speaking panel. Ma'am, am I audible to you? And please unmute your mic.
Hello, yes, you are. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So, it's very, all the conversation that I've heard about is extremely interesting. As an environmental journalist, obviously, I'm not an energy specialist, so I cannot speak about the kind of strategies that have been asked for. But I would like to just pose some questions here and some concerns because of the field experience that I've had seen different areas. And for instance, the suggestion about the solar shifting all the tube wells onto solar. Now that's very important that we utilize the solar energy option that we our geographical locale affords us. But we have also seen that if you look at the studies done in the water sector, the unrestricted abstraction of water is playing havoc with our underground water levels. So when we offer such subsidies like in Balochistan, this is not the only reason where the water table is going down. But the earlier subsidy provided through the flat rate. We saw the unrestricted use of the tube wells, which would be going on without any need. So there has to be some kind of a method adopted where I know at a small pilot level in Tata district, the organization and one of the organizations I volunteer with, they have provided solar pumps without batteries. So at least we know that during the night, the water is not being extracted. Now, these kind of small solutions also need to be thought of, when we are offering such solutions. As far as the decarbonization is concerned, as a journalist, my interest is that the kind of policies that have been put in place and the kind of promises made in the context of climate change at the international forums, like the Paris Accord, and our nationally determined contributions have been submitted, and they were reviewed and resubmitted last year. So we've already got a trajectory and of peaking and then tapering off the current fossil fuel usage. And as a journalist, I would like to, act as a strict watchdog on seeing whether those policies are being followed, because it is extremely important. We have, I know, we have gone towards coal at a time when the world is moving away from it. And that's also because of the need for energy security. And if all the other options are taken into consideration, because we see piecemeal kind of solutions rather than an integration, there are opportunities of the off-grid community being brought in through smaller solutions from different solutions. So we have to look at the off-grid market also. I know that it changes the life, and we have to look at the poverty, look at it from the poverty alleviation angle. So I'm not going to talk of the, because like I said, I'm not an energy expert, but I go into the field and I see the kind of changes it brings to the life when people are have access to energy. So we have to see the energy poverty as a, to fix that is very, there's this clear nexus between poverty alleviation on a larger scale. And my interest, of course, would be to see or hear at, or look at solutions where people's lives are changed without putting an added burden on them. And the kind of metering that is being suggested, we have to look at the profile of the people who are off-grid and see that what works for them. And the advantage of the subsidies needs to be shifted. The agricultural sector also needs stable energy supplies because it is reliant on extraction of groundwater. But we also, so I think it's the water sector that needs to work in as a in tandem with the energy sector to see what kind of solutions are being provided that do not harm rather than help in the longer run. And I mean, I'll stop here. This is just my opening thing. I would like to get a better understanding of from whatever all the other experts are going to propose, because this is something that is very important that we keep to our international commitments as well. So the decarbonization is something that we have promised. That is a path that we have to be on. But are we going to be able to meet the kind of promises that we have made to the world is something that I really need to understand through the kind of solutions that are being proposed here. So thank you very much for asking me to join. Well, I'm here more as a learner than to give any kind of a proposal. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for your good insights. But let me just add a question for you, if you can answer it. That this decade is actually very vital for the climate action, and how the environmental, and we all know that the climate crisis is a political one, not a technical one. We have the tech, we have everything, resources. So how environmental journalism can play its role for better adaptation strategies?
So, like I said, we bring our field experiences and we put the state of so I mean, we look at it from a human angle rather than a technical angle. Technical is the kind of a fix that needs to benefit the humans, and but benefit the humans not by harming the environment. So the climate crisis, of course, is very real, and it is because of the climate crisis that the fixes have been proposed. The world is coming up with these different solutions of moving on or transitioning towards clean energy. It is imperative, and those are the targets that I was talking about. That Pakistan also has those targets, but do we have the capacity to meet them? If we don't have the capacity, is it because of lack of resources? And I also mean financial as well as technical resources, the capacity of the technical capacity to be able to put in those solutions, and also the advocacy that needs to precede putting those solutions, because the appetite needs to be there in all sectors. And if you impose solutions, because I see how the communities work, they have to be taken into confidence that this will work for them in the long run. As far as what journalism can do is like bring the insights from the ground, and also take the insights from the technical community, like this forum itself, and take it towards the communities and interact with organizations which work with them. But on a larger level, at a macro level, I feel that the role of journalism goes beyond just informing. And I think journalism can serve as the watchdog to see whether the policies that are being framed and then implemented are going to work, and whether the promises or the targets that have been already agreed to nationally as well as internationally are being followed. And if they are not, then that's our role to ask questions: why not, and what can be done to meet the gap.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much for your insights. And I think that journalism is a cornerstone for climate action. And yes, you are absolutely right. You can be a watchdog for the community. So moving ahead for the discussion, I would like to call Mr. Rong for his speaking remarks. Sir, just wanted to add some things with you, because China has actually added 26.8 gigatons of coal power generation in the last year. So how can we can again develop a 1.5 compatible pathway for solar, wind, and geothermal energy in Pakistan? Thank you.
Okay, so all my friends, so very nice. We can have this opportunity to sit together to discuss all these renewable topics. First, I would like to introduce our company again. So, Port Qasim, we are a coal-fired power plant. Even though we are a coal-fired power plant, we make extra payment and use advanced technology to provide high efficient and low carbon emission electricity to this country. So we are trying our best to balance the environment and the economy together. So if you see the merit order issued by NTDC every month, so the tariff of Port Qasim is lower and competitive than much of other oil, gas, and other coal power plants. That's our efforts to lower the cost and protect the environment. But finally, everyone know. I think everyone knows the renewable energy is the future. Everyone knows this fact. But at the current stage, we have to admit the traditional fossil energy is still playing an important role in power sector. So new renewable energy is good, but at least now there's some technical limitation here. For example, the stability. So new energy like renewable energy like wind, solar, they are unstable. So if when there is a sun, there is wind, they can generate. But if there is no sun, no wind, then no power. So that's a big problem for the stable power supply. especially under the Pakistan's condition now, the grid system is the grid system now cannot bear so much unstable power. That's a problem for Pakistan. So to develop the renewable energy, before we develop this project, we must to improve the grid system. That's the first. And second is we know the instability is a problem, but as my friend just mentioned, we have other options, like use the unstable energy to produce and make hydrogen. That's a very good option. But we should also consider another problem. After we produce the hydrogen, who can use the hydrogen? So we use the hydrogen to generate electricity again? No, there is infinity problem. So we must have another industry to consume, to use the hydrogen. So for example, in China, we can produce some like a big bus or car to use hydrogen, but not use oil or gas. So I think if we choose this option to use the unstable energy to produce hydrogen, so the government should issue another policy to develop some industry to like China, like to make the hydrogen bus, a hydrogen car to consume the hydrogen. That's one option. So another option is like what I just mentioned, to improve the grid system first. Then we can invest more renewable energy, or the curtailment problem will still be a big problem without a strong grid system. So that's my opinion. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, sir, for your contribution. And yeah, that's all from the speaker side. If you have any questions from the audience, we will love to take it. Thank you.
My name is Arish Khan. I'm the editor of publications at the Institute. I have a question for Mr. Zong. So you mentioned about the lack of advanced payment meters in Pakistan and a requirement of that. I wanted to know what is the holdup. Like I've been hearing about it for God knows how many years, more than a decade, that it's a need and it's a need. Is financing the holdup? We don't have money to buy those meters. If financing is the holdup, and if it's such a need of the distribution companies, why don't the distribution companies finance it? So I just want to know, like, what's the holdup in installing those meters?
So I believe your question is focused on the payment collection issues. Currently, as I know, the distribution company they are collecting the payment from the consumer, but some part consumer is hard to collect the payment, and but also writing in the NEPRA some reports, the government is planning to install the smart meters, and want to engage some private company to work with the distribution company together to collect the payment. So I think it's a good idea to engage the private sector, because the private companies, they have more flexibility to engage with the consumers and collect the payment, and the advanced payment strategy is much easier for the private company for the implementation. Yeah, that's my concern.
If I may add, there is a cost involved in making a transition and changing the existing meters to PS-Go meters or prepaid meters. It's more of a political decision, you know, because in Pakistan, as per the NEPRA's regulatory framework, every disco goes to NEPRA and get determined its own tariff. So logically, every disco should have their own set of tariffs for the domestic consumers and different consumers category. But eventually, the ministry determines a single tariff for all of the country, and does not pass on the benefits like if KPK discos in KPK are purchasing power from hydropower projects and they have cheaper tariffs, that is not passed on. And because it's a political decision that we can't have higher tariffs in one part of the country and low tariffs in the other parts of the country. Same is the reason why we can't switch to prepaid payments, and we're still lingering on with post paid meters, and that is one of the biggest area of filtration and losses in discos. But now there is a change going on with the installation of AMIs, advanced metering system, at different levels of the grid. So right now we only have metering at the consumer level, and what the electricity is, what is generated from the power plants, and how much is electricity is passed on the consumers. What happens in between, there's no visibility to that. With the AMI meters installed at the grid station, at the transformer, and at 2-3 different levels, there will be a check that how much electricity is being generated and passed on to different nodes of the grid. So by that we can control the proliferation.
Well, thank you, sir. Thank you so much. And if may I check Dr. Rabia again? If I'm audible to you, ma'am, I just want to pose a question towards you, that how data-driven research can help Pakistan energy sector for better adaptation and mitigation strategies. Over to you, ma'am. Ma'am, can you hear me? Okay, if not, if anyone else want to answer this question, that would be a fine call. Okay, you can post one.
Thank you so much, everyone, for your very meaningful recommendations and your speeches. This is me, Lara Farad. I've been associated with the Climate Change Desk at the Institute of Regional Studies. My question is from Mr. Akil. Since you've mentioned the integrated energy policies and you've mentioned 2030 vision, I want to know if your organization that works on alternative energy, has your organization paid attention to developing such a vision? Because ultimately a part of it falls under your category, under your characterization of developing a 2030 vision of looking at how we can provide alternative energy resources. So if you could just briefly explain.
Well, yes, lately we realized, not only our organization, but all the organization in the power sector and at the level of the policymakers, that we need a centralized plan. What happened earlier on, that especially after the 18th Amendment, that, there was one organization working on the thermals, PPIB. So they were different shops of the government selling their own products. The PPIB attracting investors in the coal sector, hydro sector, thermal sector, ADB working towards development of renewable energy projects. Then there were provincial level organizations, energy departments. They're all also working. So most of the time there was duplication. And what happened, that even in the renewable energy sector, we ended up in having issuing letter of intent, or which is the starting point of developing a project, to more than 100 developers, local and international, for more than 7,000 megawatts, whereas the grid could only sustain 1,000 or 1,200 megawatts, and they were all stuck. So we had to make a policy that we can't take all of that, and that gave us a lesson that we need to have a plan in place and meet our capacity addition with our demand forecast. So we first need to do our demand forecast for the future, and then based on those demand forecasts, we need to develop our projections for capacity additions. And then we also had to couple, because once Pakistan became signatory to the climate change commitments, we also had to couple our energy additions with those with the NDCs that the Pakistan committed. The good thing is that inevitably renewables are becoming cheaper because the primary objective of the power sector is not climate, to be honest. It is because we have the electricity prices are so much high, we are going to circular debt, which is increasing. The power sector's primary concern is to have least cost generation. We need to reduce our electricity tariffs. But in the last 4 or 5 years, renewables, especially solar, is the cheapest form of electricity in Pakistan right now, when hydro is getting cheaper. Although it's still, hydro is still expensive as compared to coal. But, you know, it has a long although it has a long gestation period, but the generation is available for 60 years as compared to 20, 25, 30 years for other sources of generation. So in the long run, yes, hydro is clean and cheap, and renewables are getting cheaper. So our focus, our targets were shifted from nuclear and coal towards renewables. But having said that, we cannot straight away jump towards, you know, having 100% of renewables, or we need to have a mix of different technologies. We need, although the older, you know, in 90s and 80s, there was a concept of having a base load. You need to have a base load, and renewables are fluctuating. Whereas the new concept is that renewable is not variable. You consider renewable as a negative load. So the higher share the energy you generate from renewable, you decrease the demand, the requirement for the base load. We still need nuclear as a base load. We still need gas-based generation, which can ramp up quickly. We have to develop our hydro-based projects because and large-scale dams, because the primary their utility is in the agriculture sector, and electricity is byproduct for especially the large-scale dams, and they have also seasonality issues. So, but there are gaps in which renewable can have play a very important role, and that is why recently the government has also introduced a fast-track solarization scheme, in which what we are doing that the imported coal and gas-based power plants are being substituted with solar. So the idea is that we have in Punjab and in Sindh several thermal power plants, coal and gas, which are LNG-based power plants, which are running on imported fuels. At daytime, we'll add solar and run generate electricity from solar and decrease the output from those power plants. And in nighttime, we can use. So what will happen that we'll save on the fuel import. We'll have cheaper electricity, and that will also decrease the average basket price for the consumers.
And I think it's very important to have that. Let me add some other things. Mr. Rong mentioned that there are extreme weather events. So I will propose this question to Dr. Khalid, towards you, that within those extreme weather events, how the data-driven research can help Pakistan energy sector for the adaptation and mitigation strategies.
Well, for one thing, Akhil Saab has mentioned that the first step is to forecast a demand. Obviously, that is very data intensive. Even hourly data sets are available, data is available. So we need data at a very, very minute level and minutes level data, so that we can plan, and we can plan for the longer run, and we can plan for the shorter run as well. Because recently we have seen that we have a major power breakdown in Pakistan. That sort of problems can be solved through data and learning of patterns. Taking example from China, recently Chinese has experimented with AI, and that AI solved that nationwide breakdown in just 3 seconds. That is the power of data and machine learning and automation, that we can solve problem of the this grid system and problem of the electricity transmission and distribution through data. Secondly, if we want to cut our losses, system losses, obviously we need to know where the losses are coming from. Coupled with the technologies mentioned by Akil Saab, metering and other sort of things, combined with that technologies with data, we can certainly pinpoint that where the losses are coming from, and how can we curtail and how can we contain those losses, system losses. Secondly, extreme weather events. Obviously, we need some early warning systems. We need to learn patterns of weather. We need to learn how the crop patterns are changing. We need to learn how seasons are changing. We need to learn how glaciers are melting, because Akil Saab has mentioned that we need hydro, and hydro is obviously based on those glacial water. If that water is melting, obviously we would be facing floods, and after that floods, we would be facing two types of droughts. First one is the drought in traditional sense, agricultural drought, and the second one is the power drought, because our electricity is mainly based on hydro load, and that is the cheapest form, almost the cheapest form of electricity in Pakistan. So it is the water game. I would quote Dr. Adil Najam Saab here, that it is not about carbon, it is about water as well. Water coming from skies, flash floods and rains. Water is gone, droughts, and water is melting like never before. We are witnessing melting of glaciers. So we need to have proper data sets available to us. We need to learn the patterns. We need to predict and forecast with accuracy that what the future would look like. And then we need to plan an integrated plan in which we use our economic policies, we use our energy policies, we use our environmental policies to solve that particular triangle, which I mentioned, that 3 E's, economy, energy, and environment. So thank you.
Well, thank you so much, sir, for your remarks. Let me conclude this session if you don't have any other questions from the table. Yeah, sure, sir.
Finance is most important, but we need to look other aspects like politics in the energy sector, corruption, theft, all these things. These are actually hindering the smooth transition towards the decarbonization, for instance. So my question is, I just want to ask whether the government has identified some major carbon hotspots that needs to be transformed on the priority basis first. So do we have any kind of study and research on the major hotspots, carbon hotspots in Pakistan?
So I'm assuming that question was directed to me because you was facing. Okay. First of all, let's see the composition of where the carbon emissions are coming from. Obviously, 70% of those are coming from energy sector, and then that is agriculture and forestries and livestock and other things. FLO you mentioned, and then other sectors. The cheapest and fastest way to get this transition, it is to adopt obviously the renewable energy, and you need to retire those coal power plants. But obviously, Mr. Rong and Song has mentioned that coal in this current scenario, Pakistan's economy need coal because coal provides that short-term support to the grid, short-term support to the energy demand, and obviously it is cheapest source at this point. But if we want to go into sustainable practices, if I want to go into sustainable future, obviously we need to transit from that sort of energy transition. What is the hotspot, or what are the major sources of carbon? Obviously, that is energy sector. We need to decarbonize it. But energy sector is not just the electricity sector. Pakistan's total energy demand, electricity is just like 20% of it. Pakistan's major share of energy demand comes from the household side in terms of cooking fuel. We use 50% of our total energy demand, or meet our total energy demand through firewood, consumption of firewood. We can also decarbonize by saving our trees, by cutting down upon our firewood consumption, so that not only we are decarbonizing, we are also capturing our carbon from the air through forestation and other sort of things. So I would say it is a two-pronged approach. First one is to decarbonize, and then we need to check our behavioral patterns as well. We need to check our consumption pattern as well, so that we can have that fast-track decarbonization. Thank you.
May I make a comment?
The world needs to close coal power plants nearly 5 times faster than the current happening. So moving with this, I would like Mr. Rasheed, if you want to add something towards the discussion. Thank you.
So, the world stops using coal, good for us, we'd be able to get cheaper coal. So our per unit cost would be much less. So let's hope that happens. Plus, like Mr. Song and Mr. Rong said, our coal-fired power plants are not the traditional coal-fired power plants, because like they were set up all around the world, I would say about 20, 25 years ago. Their technology was different, their carbon emissions are different. Our plant is regulated by the Sindh Environment Protection Agency. We are meeting their standards. They asked us to grow grow some plants. We grew, I guess it was mangrove plants, something like that. They allocated us an area. We did that. We are complying with all the regulations there are. So, as discussed before, you need these coal-fired plants and RFO plants and other like gas-fired plants to have stable power in the grid. As you all already know, our national grid is not the very best. We have transmission line trips, we have power theft, and there's the issue of circular debt as well. So just relying on solar, saying 60 to 70% solar, wind, or hydrogen, whatever, is required to protect the environment. We got to also consider other challenges like the financial cost of everything. Our reserves are not in a position to sustain anything right now. We can't develop anything. So I would honestly, although I'm their employee, but I would really like everyone to thank these guys to bring the CPAC project here, because if it wasn't here, we'd be sitting here with no power for these mics. There would be no electricity. So just these 3 imported coal-fired power plants, they generate up to, I don't know, the capacity is about 4,000 megawatt, 5,000 megawatt. So and their cost is really low as well compared to RFO, other power plants. So I do hope, like the Global Initiative report, whatever it is, it's saying that the world is going to be relying less on coal. I hope that does happen. Right now, we are generating electricity at 21 rupees per unit. As per that report, if everybody stops using coal, our cost will probably come down to 3-4 rupees per unit. So I do hope that happens.
That is a report which monitors the energy around the globe. Well, thank you so much for all the speakers for coming here. And let me conclude this session with our ambassador, Nadeem Riaz. May I give you the floor, sir? Please.
are obviously subject to any further discussion which you would want to have. Okay. So when you look at Pakistan, what are the challenges which we are facing right now? You have energy shortages. You have environmental hazards. And there's no doubt that you have an extremely, extremely underperforming economy. You have major issues of governance. You have a lack of data. And that lack of data inhibits proper planning and research and development. Added to that, you have an inconsistent policy in the field of energy. You talk about hydro, you talk about fossil fuel, you talk about coal energy. So I think at the end of the day, there really is a confusion in the mind of our policymakers of what they want to do and how they want to proceed. No doubt that coal is a good alternate source of energy, but regardless of whatever you may put in, it's still regarded as a dirty source of energy. I just wanted to clarify that. We have short-term planning. There is a lack of holistic approach. As I said, there is too much reliance on fossil fuels. You have, unfortunately, a very variable and inconsistent demand pattern in our use of energy. Tell me another country in the world where shops are allowed to open till midnight, when they consume the maximum amount of electrical energy in the evenings. We waste energy in the field of agriculture. There are many reports now which are there, which clearly indicate that since you have installed these solar panels, the tube wells, they continue to run because the farmers, they don't have to pay any energy bills. So what does that do? That leads to depletion of the water which is in the soil. We have very high energy costs. And then there is the wastage of water. There is water scarcity. Our cropping patterns are not in line with the cropping patterns which would lead to a higher yield per acre. So these are the challenges which we face, and all of these were more or less corroborated by the different speakers present over here. But the second part is that what is the way forward? And here, my opinion, I would like to express my opinion. I think the most important thing is awareness. You have to make the people aware of the crisis of climate change which is on us and which is going to increase with every passing day. Flash floods, earthquakes, rapid melting of glaciers, that is on us. It's not that it's going to happen to us in the future. It is on us right now, and we have experienced it last year. There are some reports which say that this year we'll be facing some drought. I honestly don't know, because I think there is less amount which we put in research on these things. We need to develop stable policies. Why do I say that? Because when there is a lack of stability and policies change from government to government, or the thrust of the policy changes from government to government, it affects our partners. It affects foreign investors. It affects the countries which we are very close with, because they really don't know what is happening. And uncertainty impedes financing. Uncertainty impedes bringing in the latest technology. There is no doubt that along with the existing sources of energy which you have, you need to focus on renewable energy. Pakistan is a country which is blessed with a lot of sunshine. It is blessed with a lot of wind or aeolian energy or energy currents. But the thing is that these particular, any renewable energy, whether you are talking about bringing in electric cars, it requires a heavy investment of capital. And the way our economy is doing, I don't think the government has the ability or the strength to actually provide the necessary resources for bringing in this renewable energy. Fine, it is bringing it in, but at a much slower pace than what it is required. So where does this lead us? It leads us to a public-private partnership. It leads us to incentives. Because if there are incentives, then people would want to invest in a much cleaner form of energy. But obviously, they should have the incentives, because minus the incentives and minus the stability of policy, nobody would do that. There is a lack of data, which I mentioned. So if you want to do proper research and development, you need that data. So the stress has to be on collection of this data, analyzing it, and synthesizing it towards recommendations which can take the process forward. In Pakistan, we lack early warning systems. These early warning systems have to be developed because they will be a sort of a, I would say, an insurance of the hazards which are coming our way. But all these recommendations which I have said, from awareness to development of energy, early warning systems and all, they can only happen if there is stability. There is political stability in the country. Because minus political stability, all these remedies which I have mentioned, they will remain a mirage. Because political instability will not bring in investment. It will not bring in the necessary research and development. It will not bring in the necessary technology, which today is absolutely required to face the challenges, whether it is of reducing the imprint of, reducing the carbon imprint, or it is increasing the productivity in agriculture and leading again to food security. And in the end, I would just like to say that we are a country which is extremely resilient. We have faced challenges in the past and we have been able to overcome them. And I'm sure if proper stress is placed on the challenges which we face today, we can work out a remedy for moving forward. And lastly, I think indigenous development of products is absolutely essential because one, it reduces the cost, and then local solutions always work much better in tried and tested environment in which it is operationalized. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. President, for this recommendations. And yes, we need local solution for the global problems. Having said that, we are moving toward to 3-degree world in which a lot of population is on vulnerable stake. Last year, Pakistan actually faced 33 millions of people which are actually displaced due to floods, and 15 billion of US dollars on the losses. So thank you so much. I'm going to conclude this session, and thank you so much all the speakers for coming, who are present in person and who are present in virtually. Lastly, I want to give a floor to Miss Afia for her recommendations. Ma'am, you are audible to us now.
Thank you so much. I had my hand up earlier. So, because I didn't think that anybody would be speaking after Ambassador Saab, so I have put my comments in the chat as well. And what I have said is that, we are looking at solutions, and I'd heard the mention of hydro being very cheap, but we have really got to start looking at things holistically. Because it's cheap in what? The ultimate price of electricity that is cheap through hydros. But what about the environmental costs that we bear of these mega projects, as well as the human cost, the displacement and the cost to the environment? Like, we have some of the biggest hydro projects over here, but where we have lost our delta. So to benefit one part of the country at the cost of another part of the country is just not on anymore in a world that is realizing that climate justice has to be kept in the center of anything that is being done. So the awareness of these elements also is extremely important, because all the projects that we are trying to do to, raise the economic profile of our country, economic profile without a human development means nothing. It's just a numbers game. So I keep coming back, I know, to these intangible benefits or intangible factors, but it is because I move around within the people who are being impacted. Pakistan is a country that has been in the top 10 brackets of countries vulnerable to climate change for over a past decade and a half. But that corresponding threat perception is not there throughout the society. If it was a threat from any neighboring country or any other adversarial country, there are several measures that we take to deal with the kind of a threat you're dealing with. But over here, to deal with the threat that climate change poses to Pakistan, we do not see all the sectors working in tandem to deal with it. So unless and until there are integrated policies, we will not be able to do that. The other thing is that, yes, political instability is there. And to give the devil its due, we may have political instability, we have corruption, we have also lack of capacity. But Pakistan is not the only country that is plagued with these things. And yet, the policies actually cut through the political lines. In our country, the policies are hostage to the politics, and this is why we don't get investment. We've seen. It's not very nice to name countries, but we know that on the corruption index there are countries above us, and yet on the human development index they are higher than us. So there has to be some reason for this. This is also something that we need to research, because they have stable policies. The policies don't depend on the kind of government that's in place. They depend on the kind of, the situation in the country. So we need to sort of rise above those political narratives and see what's good for the country. So I'll just stop here. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity.
Thank you so much, ma'am. And thank you so much for today's event.
Thank you.